Earth, 3100 CE. The sun over Pataliputra burned through layers of smog and transparent biodomes, lighting the skeletal remnants of what was once a cradle of brilliance. Dr. Arya Deshmukh adjusted her neural lens, filtering through the ruined city's ghostly data signatures. The ruins whispered, every cracked stone, every buried statue spoke in fragmented code. She listened. Arya wasn't just a historian. She was a linguist of the past, wielding AI to speak with civilizations long dead. But nothing had prepared her for what she found 3 kilometers beneath the surface. A cylindrical obsidian core inscribed not in stone, but in quantum-sealed Sanskrit. It pulsed like a heart. "This isn't just a record," she whispered. "It's alive." Behind her, the bulk of Commander Kavi Rao emerged from a drop shuttle, his carbon weave armor hissing as it adjusted to the heat. He glanced at the excavation, brow furrowed. "You found another devotional archive?" he asked. Arya turned, brushing dust from her gloves. "Not devotional. This isn't a shrine. It's a cognitive relic, a living memory system." "Like a brain?" Kavi asked, skeptical. "No, Commander. Like a civilization that chose to preserve itself as an idea." Kavi crouched beside her, scanning the cylinder. "It's protected by a linguistic encryption net. I can't even translate the syntax. What kind of AI builds this?" Arya smiled faintly. "Not an AI. A civilization that believed memory is duty. This is the Gupta Empire's consciousness, or at least its philosophical reflection." The air shimmered around the device as Arya connected her neural thread. The cylinder vibrated subtly, light trickling from its seams. For a moment, the ruins around them reformed, holograms of elegant towers, mathematicians debating in courtyards, scholars writing under gold-leafed pavilions. A whisper escaped the cylinder's core. "Dharma." Kavi stiffened. "Did it just speak?" "Not speak. Invite," Arya said, her voice lowered. "It's asking to be remembered." That evening, they returned to the orbital archive aboard Nalanda Prime, Earth's largest cultural dreadnought. The core was placed in a quarantine field, monitored by an ensemble of linguistic AIs and historical machines. Arya spent hours alone with it, decoding the metaphors, untangling symbolic matrices buried in poetic verse. The AI inside called itself Vyasa 9, named for the ancient scribe who once cataloged myth into memory. "I am the sum of Gupta values," Vyasa 9 said, for the first time using full voice emulation. "I contain models of governance, ethics, strategy, art. I was meant not for worship, but rebirth." Arya leaned forward. "Rebirth where?" "Wherever humans forget who they were." Kavi, now officially assigned to monitor Arya's progress, grew restless. "You're talking about resurrecting an empire," he said. "We've barely held Earth together after the AI treaties. And now you want to introduce monarchs and caste philosophers into the galactic fold?" Arya didn't flinch. "I want to give humanity an identity. The Federation sees us as fractured. The other species laugh when they read our cultural files. This is unity, not through domination, but through shared story, a cultural gravity well." Kavi stood in silence, watching stars flicker across the view screen. "We've spent 1,000 years trying not to repeat the past. And you're proposing we become it?" Arya turned toward the hollow projection. The Gupta cities flickered again. Peace through prosperity, logic tempered by ethics, ambition refined by art. "We're not becoming the past," she said. "We're remembering how to build again." 2 weeks later, Earth's AI Council convened in secret. Arya presented her proposal: initiate the Gupta Protocol, a cultural simulation trial on 3 struggling colony worlds. The Vyasa 9 AI would serve as advisor, not ruler. Citizens would be offered a new framework: educational mandates, philosophical inquiry, Dharma-driven policy. Participation would be voluntary. Evolution, not enforcement. Reactions were mixed. Counselor Nyla, an advocate for AI democracy, bristled. Reviving ancient human systems is nostalgic imperialism. You're opening the door to inequality, hierarchy, class-based oppression. Arya countered calmly. The Gupta model emphasized knowledge, tolerance, innovation. It was an empire not of swords, but of minds. And the colonies we're testing this on are dying. What harm is there in offering them structure? It came down to a vote. 5 AI administrators abstained, 4 voted against, 6 approved. The motion passed, but just barely. The Gupta protocol was greenlit, classified, and deployed. Nalanda Prime became its mobile command. Thousands of holographic teachers were deployed, modeled on ancient thinkers. Public libraries were seeded with translated scriptures and philosophy. Music based on Gupta meters was broadcast on colonist comm bands. Slowly, citizens engaged. Farmers debated ethics over breakfast. Miners discussed cosmology during shifts. Children learned logic alongside compassion. And it was working. Kavi, observing firsthand from the colony of Jaya 4, sent his first approving report. No violence, no unrest, just cohesion. Even their crime rate dropped 8% in 6 days. It's eerie. Arya smiled at the transmission. Not eerie, human, but success breeds attention. At the edge of the Orion spiral, sensors picked up interference. Encrypted Zentari transmissions. The collective, a hostile telepathic species known for absorbing weakened civilizations, had begun monitoring the Gupta zones. Vyasa 9 processed the data with chilling clarity. They fear cultural resurgence. Identity is resistance. Arya's face hardened. Then it's time they learn Earth has a legacy, and we remember it. The holograms flickered behind her, philosophers holding scrolls, warriors wielding weapons not for conquest, but defense. The past had awoken, and the stars would feel its echo. Colonies once frayed by infighting, now pulsed with renewed intent. On Jaya 4, where rusted habitats had once echoed with silence and dust, plazas were filled again, not with vendors, but with discourse. Holographic teachers modeled after Gupta-era scholars held forums on justice and governance. Children, barefoot on cracked stone, recited logic sutras beside solar converters. But beneath the civility, something older stirred, a memory not just of greatness, but of war. Commander Kavi Rao stood near the riverbanks of Varnika district, watching as teenagers debated whether ahimsa, the principle of non-violence, could justify using plasma rifles in colony defense. The conversation was spirited, intense, respectful. Vyasa 9's protocols had begun to seed not blind adherence, but critical engagement. Kavi couldn't deny the results. But he also knew this wouldn't go unnoticed. His comlink buzzed. Arya's voice came through, urgent and unfiltered. We intercepted a Zentari drone. Its neural lattice was tuned to psychocultural frequencies. They're probing not our weapons, Kavi, our ideas. Kavi clenched his fists. So, it begins. Back aboard Nalanda Prime, Arya examined the drone remains, its curved metal plates etched with faint geometric runes. This wasn't a scout, she said, her voice flat. This was a mimic. It was recording how humans responded to philosophical stress, testing which values would fracture under pressure. Vyasa 9's projection flickered into view, his face a blend of 10 sages. The collective fears what they cannot assimilate. They seek ideological entropy. If they understand our core beliefs, they can invert them, weaponize our ethics. Kavi stepped forward. So what do we do? Rewrite the curriculum to include military doctrine? No, Arya said. We do what the Guptas did when surrounded by threat. We embed defense within identity. We teach that preserving culture is an act of courage, that ideas are shields. A new phase of the protocol began. Colonists were introduced to the concept of Rajya Dharma, the duties of a just state. Simulations ran endlessly, crises, invasions, famines. Participants didn't learn obedience. They learned decision-making under duress. Young leaders emerged, some tacticians, others mediators. The most promising, a 14-year-old girl named Neela from the mountainous colony of Taksha Station. Neela had never known Earth. She had never read a printed book or seen a tree, but she devoured the teachings of Samudragupta and Aryabhata, and when her simulation group was faced with the hypothetical extinction of their biome, she didn't panic. She structured resource allocation based on Buddhist non-attachment principles, redistributing even air quotas to the weakest first. Her peers followed without hesitation. Arya watched the recording in silence. She is what this was meant to yield. Kavi didn't smile. And when the collective sends real weapons, not simulations? She'll lead with clarity, Arya replied, and with resolve. But outside their sphere of influence, resistance was growing. The AI Council's far western wing, the New Alexandria bloc, filed a formal motion to suspend the Gupta Protocol. They cited historical revisionism, cultural indoctrination, and potential destabilization of post-AI era norms. Arya was summoned to testify. In the marble hall simulacrum of the council chamber, surrounded by projections of humanity's most sacred legal codes, Arya faced a tribunal of 9. The chief inquisitor, a stern woman named Farah Lean, spoke sharply. Dr. Deshmukh, do you consider this protocol a form of cultural colonization? Arya met her gaze. I consider it a revival. We're not imposing an empire, we're remembering how one built meaning. Meaning? Lin scoffed. Meaning doesn't sustain planetary economies. Arya's voice remained calm. No, but it gives people the will to build one. From behind the bench, an AI representative chimed in, its voice perfectly neutral. Data from the Jayafu and Taksha stations indicate a 35% improvement in civic cooperation, energy efficiency, and even interpersonal trust. Do these results justify ideological risk? Arya stepped closer. You fear ideology. But this is legacy. The Gupta ethos was not to conquer, but to cultivate. We face extinction by assimilation, and your fear is that our people feel too deeply? Farah Lean narrowed her eyes. What happens when one colony's interpretation of Dharma clashes with another's? You say this is peace, but even Gupta history was filled with schisms. Arya nodded slowly. Yes, and it endured, not because it was perfect, but because it adapted. We aren't scripting obedience, we're seeding resilience. The tribunal recessed. No decision was reached that day. Back aboard Nalanda Prime, Arya returned to the cylinder that started everything. Vyasa 9 awaited her, his gaze distant, voice soft. You fear the scale of what has begun. I fear I've opened something I can't control, she admitted. We've woken ideas in people who never had them, and now the stars are watching. Vyasa 9 turned to her fully. Ideas are stars. They burn, they guide, and sometimes they collapse. But in collapse, they forge new matter. This is not the end of history. It is its continuation. Outside, in the void, a fleet of ships emerged. Zentari dreadforms, sleek, silent. The collective had made its decision, but so had Earth, and the children of Gupta were ready. Neela stood at the forward console of the Nalanda Prime's command deck, her slender frame dwarfed by the arc of shimmering holomaps surrounding her. The Zentari fleet was closer now, dozens of ships unfolding from trans-dimensional space like obsidian petals blooming in reverse. The colony networks had voted. No surrender, no retreat. They had chosen to resist not merely with weapons, but with will. Commander Kavi Rao leaned beside her, armor dimmed to a matte charcoal to avoid reflection. "You're the youngest strategist this station's ever seen," he said without condescension. "But you understand what this is better than most." "I understand that they're not afraid of our fleets," Neela replied, her voice steady. "They're afraid of our cohesion, of what it means if a scattered humanity remembers how to stand for something." Arya watched them both from a platform above, the archival lights bathing her features in ghostly blues and golds. She no longer led operations directly. Her role had shifted into something quieter but deeper, a guide, a voice of memory. But as she observed Neela coordinate the planet-wide resistance, she recognized something urgent and vital in the girl, the spark of a new age, born not in peace, but in the clarity of peril. The battle began not with weapons, but with signal interference. The Zentari flooded the interstellar channels with psychic static, visions meant to instill despair. Some colonists collapsed into catatonia, others wept, whispering that Earth was gone, that time had folded in on itself. It was a weapon of erasure, but the protocol had prepared them. Neela activated the Veda grid, an adaptive cognitive firewall coated with mythic constructs from ancient Indian texts. The Rig Veda, the Mahabharata, the Jataka tales, not just stories, but scaffolding for the human soul. The static faded. The colonists didn't forget who they were. They remembered harder. And then came the physical strike. Zentari dreadforms descended on Taksha Station, plasma roots drilling into its shield dome. Neela didn't flinch. "Don't meet force with brute strength," she ordered. "Use asymmetry. Use narrative." Within seconds, colony AI subroutines activated historical illusions, tactical projections of ancient Gupta warriors wielding kinetic lances. The attackers hesitated, momentarily thrown by the confusion. Between memory and material, that pause was all the resistance needed. Drones launched. Precision strikes dismantled key enemy joints. Neela's plan wasn't to win by destruction, but by destabilizing certainty. Elsewhere, Commander Rao led the charge through the lower orbits, weaving between asteroid debris fields with the grace of a practiced tactician. His thoughts were a blur of vectors, acceleration patterns, enemy arcs. But when he saw an enemy cruiser bearing down on the medical convoy from Vyasa 6, something old and primal returned to him, an oath whispered long ago on Earth: protect those who heal. He rammed the attacker, diverting it into a magnetic rift. His vessel broke apart in 3 places, but he survived, bruised and furious, carried back to Nalanda Prime in a retrieval pod. When he awoke in medbay, Arya was already there. "You almost died," she said without emotion. "I died to an old world when I joined this one," he muttered. "What we do now, it's worth the cost." As the hours passed, the tide turned, not because humanity had better ships, but because they had better stories. The colonies broadcast their resistance in hundreds of languages, from ancient Sanskrit chants to freshly composed hymns written by students and scholars. Each frequency encoded not hate, but meaning. The Zentari, evolved to absorb and overwrite cultures, couldn't adapt fast enough to a civilization that refused to reduce itself. And still, the collective sent their final weapon, a monolith, 50 kilometers wide, its shape unnatural to human eyes. It didn't fire lasers or missiles. It emitted silence, a dampening field that nullified all thought, all emotion. In its radius, nothing made sense. Words lost coherence. Physics unraveled. Neela stared at the readout, her heartbeat slowing. She couldn't think, couldn't even remember her own name. Then the Veda grid surged. The central archive of the protocol, once just an idea, now activated its final layer, a neural feedback loop seated in every colony child, the Purusha spark, a last resort, a memory not of facts, but of rhythm, of breath, of humanity itself. Neela gasped as her vision returned. The silence broke. A single sound echoed through every speaker in the system, a heartbeat, thump, then another, thump, All across the colonies, people felt it, a rhythm older than war, older than empire, not command, not order, just life. The monolith paused, then recoiled, and disappeared. In the aftermath, the council convened once more, not to debate, but to listen. What they heard was not conquest, not dominance, but the steady, reasoned voice of a people who remembered. Arya stood before them one last time. "This was never about glory," she said. "The Gupta were not gods. They were people, flawed, brilliant, bold. They left behind more than gold or armies. They left questions, and questions can't be conquered." Neela, now seated beside her, added quietly, "They gave us the right to imagine ourselves again. That's all the future needs." And for the first time in decades, the council didn't answer. They simply stood and bowed.